Hands up if you have weeds in your garden that you battle with. Good. We're all on the same page then. And possibly I should have included a weed trigger warning on these slides. So apologies if you've got PSD from weeds. This is me out in the weeds doing my normal day job. Been at DOC for 25 years, as Justana said, most of that time doing research on weeds. I'm telling you about a story today, and it begins with Madeline Newman, believe it or not. You may have heard her speak here yesterday from the AI Forum of New Zealand. She was speaking at a biosecurity conference that I was attending, and she was talking about a number of things, but included mentioning this thing called the AI for the Environment hackathon. And she asked the audience, if you have an environmental problem that needs a tech solution, to come and tell her, or even better, come along to the hackathon. And I thought, well, so I do have a weed problem that needs a tech solution. And so off I went to the hackathon, despite not really knowing what a hackathon even was. Ended up teamed up with this really smart group of young guys. We were all orphans, so we had arrived without having a team already pre-formed. And of course, we were called Team Deep Weed. And these guys saw the benefit of having a subject matter expert in their team, and we all really reaped the benefit from each other. And we won. This was a Wellington region competition. Next step, we had the option of going to the AI Summit and pitching again at the national final. And I thought, well, what's the point of doing that? It's not actually going to mean anything. But then I realised, well, if we went and I made sure that we won, that would mean that would give me a platform to take the next step with DOC leadership. So we did that. We went along to the national final, and indeed we won. Well, I better tell you about this weed problem that I took along to the hackathon. New Zealand is very weedy. We've got about 2,000 species already having significant impacts in our natural environment. We've got at least another 20,000 exotic plant species already present in New Zealand, mostly still in people's gardens, and we don't know which of these are the weeds of tomorrow. Why do we care? Well, you'll know from your garden that weeds can have major impacts on steroids out in the natural environment. They affect native species, ecosystems, amenity values, primary productivity values, huge impacts. And yes, they're very expensive to control. We spend roughly $50 million a year on weed control in New Zealand. That's a drop in the bucket. And that does not include the money that we're spending on wilding pines, which represent a $4 billion liability alone. In the budget this year, an additional $79 million was allocated for wilding pine management in New Zealand. So it's a hugely expensive problem when weeds get out of hand like wilding pines are. And this is a problem. By the time we notice a new weed, it's usually too late to eradicate it. Heaps of data around the world show that very few weed eradication attempts are successful if the infestation is more than about a hectare. So it's really only feasible when it's a really small infestation, i.e. when it's newly invaded. Unless you've got unlimited resources, of course, which we never have. Sometimes we get lucky, so somebody knowledgeable just happens to notice the plant in the ground or digital record online and just happens to know that it's significant in some way. But a personal record personal story to illustrate this, my husband, who has spent decades studying seabirds on Mana Island, happens to know a little bit about weeds as well, funnily enough, happened to notice the seedling of climbing asparagus growing by the wood pile and knew that it was a bad weed, but also that it wasn't already established on Mana Island. So we pulled it out. And this is what typically happens. We just get lucky. And this is what climbing asparagus can do if you let it get away. So it shows the significance. So just like with predators, stoats, it's really important to pick up the first invasion if you're going to avoid these massive impacts and hugely expensive control operations. And of course, picking up weeds early means that it's much cheaper and easier to control, and you end up with way fewer weed impacts, which is good for biodiversity. And this is a problem all over the world. Any country that has the luxury of worrying about weeds has the same issue. They don't have a good system for picking up new weeds when they first invade, unless they get lucky. And this is not because we don't have a lot of weed data. We have a mountain of weed data, but guess what? It's all in silos. All the regional councils have their own separate databases, DOC, MPI, national herbariums, all have their own separate databases of weed data, and this makes sense. It's just the way the world is. I've got GBIF in the centre there, and I'll just highlight this, and it's crucial to the story. If you haven't heard of GBIF, has anybody heard of GBIF, the Global Biodiversity Facility? One. Woo! This is a global platform for biodiversity sharing, supported by governments all around the world, including New Zealand. Huge data source of all sorts of biodiversity data, so not just plant data. Some organisations are already feeding their data into GBIF, including all the New Zealand herbariums, and also iNaturalist. Who's heard of iNaturalist? A few more. Good. If you haven't, iNaturalist is this free, easy to use app that's really good for learning what you're looking at out in the environment. You can take a photo of a plant or a bird or a mushroom and learn about what species you're looking at. And the bonus is that record that you've just taken adds to the data because it feeds up into GBIF. So GBIF's got all these, probably 100 different data sets feeding into it. iNaturalist data is one of the main ones. Some other organisations are starting to migrate their weed data in particular into GBIF, including Auckland Council and Environment Canterbury, recently taken part in a pilot study to figure out how easy is this to get our weed data feed into GBIF. And DOC has done the same sort of thing. So we've all got some of our weed data feeding to GBIF now. And this is just a slide to illustrate the impact of having data in silos. You can see that the 3 regional councils on the left and DOC data on the right, while these are all in separate places, we really don't have an accurate picture of weed distributions in New Zealand. And this was helpfully pointed out in 2021, a report from the Parliamentary Commissioner for the Environment on the way New Zealand manages weeds in New Zealand. And he pointed out a bunch of things, including the things that I've just outlined, the fact that weed surveillance is really patchy and largely relies on luck. We're not doing any systematic surveillance for those 20,000-ish exotic plant species we know are already in the country. And we're not doing any regular scanning, even of iNaturalist, to pick up new weed incursions. It's just too labour intensive. No one's got the resources all the time. And the report pointed out that we really need to do better, and DOC certainly agreed with this assessment. So, what is this tool that I am talking about? I'm talking about the Smart Weed Alert tool. Is the digital tool that we've been developing, which uses data that's already been collected, like from GBIF, and is going to significantly improve our chances of picking up new weeds when they first invade. I won't go into a lot of detail on how it works, but basically users are able to create highly specific alerts based on their criteria of interest. And the first question is, what sort of weeds are you interested in? You might only want to know about new or uncommon weeds when something new turns up in your area. You might be interested in a particular category of weeds. For example, the regional councils will be interested in their regional pest management species, or you might be interested in banned plants, or you might know what species you're looking for. And then you choose your geographic area of interest, and this can be anything from the whole of New Zealand to an island, a region, a suburb, management area, iwi area of interest, right down to your local restoration site, and eventually user-defined. Users will be able to upload their own polygon to create an alert for whatever area they're interested in. And there are a whole lot of other functionality in there that people can use to refine their alerts, such as you might want to add a buffer zone so that you hear about these new weeds before they get to your special area. You can decide how far back in time you want to include records from, what sort of location accuracy is useful or not useful to you. So a whole lot of different things. And basically, the aim is that users only get alerts that are actually useful. Unlike the boy who cried wolf, you don't want to get so many alerts that you just can't even look at them, and so you start ignoring them and you miss the significant records. There are other weed alert tools out there. Australia has 3 of them, believe it or not. They're all slightly different, relatively limited functionality, and usually a bit clunky to use, and almost always result in way too many alerts that you still have to do a whole lot of background research on to decide whether this new record is something you need to worry about or not. So next step in the story, I heard about this thing called a GovTech accelerator, which is basically a 4-month program of wraparound support, coaching, mentoring, time with software developers to take the idea and see if it's got legs. And I got funding to do this miraculously, $55,000, which at the time, with DOC budgets, $55,000 is a lot of money. Most of my career, my weed research budget per year is about $10,000 to $20,000. So yeah, that was a bargain, because basically at the end of the 4 months, we had a working prototype of Smart Weed Alert tool. People critical in this whole story, I've mentioned Madeline Newman and my hackathon team. Next one is Johnny Haddon. Some of you will know Johnny from Creative HQ, Government Innovation Lead. He was our mentor in the accelerator, and so was a really crucial part of this story. Next person that came along, crossed my path miraculously, was this guy called Nigel Charman, aka Mr. Old Man's Beard Free Wellington. He's a real passionate weed controller, but miraculously also has a tech background. Jules called herself a unicorn. I have my own unicorn, and that was Nigel, who was a really critical part of the story, because he could, he had feet in both areas: weed data, world of weeds, and technology. And he was a major reason why we've been able to move at startup speed. A critical relationship is with the software developers, X-Equals, a local Wellington company based on Cuba Street, real passionate about GovTech, champions of the agile approach, rapid prototyping, fail fast and fix it. And as I said, we had a working prototype in 4 months. And Brian Roche mentioned the value of, using our local companies rather than going offshore big tech. And this was another major reason why we were able to move so quickly. Pop round the corner to ask the guys if there's a question, rather than having to wait a week to get an answer for anything. So yeah, that was really brilliant. So there's a happy team on day 1 of the accelerator, I think, with Alex on the left and Rox on screen. They're both from X-Equals. Rox is based in Melbourne, and me and Nigel. So post-accelerator, we were convinced that we had a good idea and it was going to work. It already kind of was working. So next step, had to get down to business. And of course, this was about asking for some more money. Never easy in any government department, especially DOC, I might say, especially when it's a bit you know, the project is a bit outside the normal wheelhouse, and the person leading it has never done that sort of thing before. So miraculously, I managed to get some more funding, and this was the first meeting post accelerator when we had that funding to take the next step. And you know, I don't expect you to see it, but it just illustrates that we hit the ground running. You know, we were able to keep working with X equals, and you know, I was just amazed what our starting point was. But this also reminds me that I had to get very comfortable being in a room where I didn't really understand what other people were talking about. It was like a different language. So that was one of my, you know, learnings that I had to get comfortable with. So where are we at now? SWAT will be going live in a few months. We're just entering into the second or third round of user testing. It's open source. I don't think I mentioned that. Yeah, that was a key aspect that we wanted to do and got permission to do that early on. So watch the space. Some of the barriers that I experienced, there were a few. For example, when you think of dock, you probably think of forests and rivers and maybe some birds and pest control, island biosecurity, perhaps tramping tracks and huts. But developers of innovative world-leading tech tools, probably not so much, although I should point out we have an amazing electronics team and we do produce some really cool gadgets that are world-leading. But yeah, so this is where the space I was operating from, a weed scientist, more at home out in the weeds, so to speak, than at my computer, trying to develop this tech tool. So it was by no means a sure bet. And of course, self-doubt was a problem from day one. What would I know? What if I make a mistake? What if I waste money? What if I end up on the front page of the paper? What if I'm seen to be taking scarce conservation dollars away from threatened species? You know, endless doubts that I just had to put aside because, well, feel the fear and do it anyway. There was a lot of that. I had to get a lot of yeses from a lot of different people, from my manager all the way up to the Director General and effectively the Minister of Conservation. Any one of those could have killed it dead with a no. So kudos to them for, you know, embracing the opportunity and allowing a little bit of risk to happen. So I had to be really convinced that what I was doing was a good idea, and that was an absolute critical part of the story as well. If I wasn't sure about it, how am I going to convince anybody else? So I had to get really good at storytelling and effectively have a good elevator pitch, just like running a startup, basically. Now, this will make your eyes go wobbly, and that's on purpose, because this is what the procurement processes did to me, and was probably the only point where I came close to giving up. And it would have been easy to give up if I hadn't been utterly convinced that this was a good idea and was really going to make a difference. And just pointing out that this sort of island hopping from the idea to the hackathon to the accelerator, then getting funding committed was, you know, crucial to the success of this as well. If I'd tried to go straight from the good idea to the digital tool development, it never would have happened. I wouldn't have asked in the first place because I wouldn't have known where to even start. I have to mention AI because I'm in the AI stream, although SWAT doesn't use AI, didn't need to be that smart actually, but we have certainly used AI in the development in a whole bunch of ways, and it's certainly been the reason we've been able to go so fast. Nigel gave me an example. In 3 days, I gave him 5,500 lines of code, 2,000 lines of documentation, and 7,000 lines of input data. And we've used it for lots of other things as well. For example, species descriptions for the 20,000 or so species that we've got in the database is underway. And in future, if we get funding, we hope to include an AI-powered tool that will help to predict weed spread and invasion risk from the current distribution. This is a remarkably similar image to the conference logo, and just to make the point that, of course, secret to success, as with any project, is all about the people, even a tech project, particularly the three-way relationship between me, Nigel, and Alex from X equals. I'm being a bit silly with this slide, but you know, just to illustrate that the three of us, three strong personalities with slightly different areas of expertise and responsibility. If there was, you know, there was a lot of potential there if we couldn't get along, basically. So relationships, perspectives, so important. There was a lot of this stepping outside my comfort zone, as I've already alluded to, and also I had to learn this very quickly. Can't expect perfection. And again, mirroring Jules's talk, here comes Hamlet again, sorry Shakespeare, we had to decide pretty quickly, were we going to design a bespoke tool or adapt something off the shelf? And X equals being knowledgeable about this sort of thing, recommended that we use Civic Theme. It's designed by the Australian government, millions of dollars spent on it, so it's proven government platform, government compliant by design, so accessibility and security already built in, supported and maintained, of course, by the Australian government. They're using it, so they're going to be continuing to fix bugs, keep it up to date, and we get the benefit of all that. So, of course, this was crucial for the fact that we could move very quickly with our development. My life motto, it's always worth asking. It can be amazing what you can achieve if you just ask, because, of course, if you don't ask, it's always going to be no. And this was a good illustration of what can happen just because I thought, oh, what the hell, I'll ask. And just a couple of quotes from David Downs, who was interviewed by Johnny Haddon recently. Government innovation isn't a contradiction in terms, it just needs somewhere to happen. And the barrier isn't that government can't innovate, it's the story that it shouldn't try. And I think SWAT is a good example of what these mean. I haven't really talked much about how the tool itself works, so if you're interested in that sort of detail, you can ask me later. It is already working. Reports from our user testers include, you may have just notified us about a serious potential weed on our doorstep. It's proving its worth already. SWAT's already revealing interesting records such as Royal Fern and New Plymouth, where it's either a new record for the region or someone's cultivating it illegally. And SWAT has alerted us to 6 historical infestations that we didn't know about that we need to follow up. Of course, New Zealand is already known as a world leader in pest management, so this will do no harm to that reputation. And just a last reminder about GBIF, because we're using data from GBIF, which is all biodiversity data, that means that SWAT will be easily adapted to other types of organisms and to other countries. It's going to be open source, and we're doing our best to document things in a way that it's going to be easy for other countries to pick up. And again, just highlighting the fact that iNaturalist automatically feeds into GBIF. So anybody using iNaturalist is automatically contributing to SWAT. And just thinking about things recorded on iNaturalist, you'd be amazed. I thought, there won't be many people recording ants because they're so tiny and you can't see them. And in Australia, look at this, nearly 200,000 observations of 789 ant species. Who knew there were that many different types of ants? Anyway, just making my point that there's a lot of data out there that can be harnessed that we're not using by any means effectively at the moment. Just finishing with everybody's favourite weed, Russell Limpins. And a last plug that if you want to help with the weed fight in New Zealand and contribute to SWAT, please learn how to use iNaturalist and record plants. It's a really fun way to learn what you're looking at. Even in Auntie Joan's garden, you see a plant you like, she can't remember what it's called, you might want to find out what it is so you can go and buy it for your garden. It's brilliant like that. Thank you.
So that's such a cool intersection of tech being tangible, right? And it's important to show, great to have a slick ETL, but it's really tangible when you have outcomes like this. And just to nod as well, and other folks have hit on it too, just because you have the AI hammer doesn't mean that everything is a nail. So using it thoughtfully in this case, like on the technical development side and all those lines of code, but then on the sustainable end user, what is that human context? And 25 years at Doc, you've got a lot of great context to bring. So thank you so much for that. Being from Seattle, Washington, weed budget is very different than what you're talking about. So we'll turn to a couple questions. This feels like the exception that proves the rule. Innovation in Gov is so hard and we don't make it easier for ourselves. What is one systemic thing you would change if you had a wish and a magic wand?
Oh, that's a hard one. And it's hard to be objective about this because really it was driven by my passion rather than thinking about how can we do this sort of thing better. So possibly that's a key thing, is if you want to try and do something, make sure you've got someone on your team that's really passionate about it. Yeah, that's hard to
If also magic one question, if you could have made any aspect of that procurement process less painful, what is one thing you think would help?
Well, I think it's already happening. Our Chief Information Officer, I made sure he realised how many different forms I was having to fill out, and he was horrified and said that yes, they can definitely improve that. So within Doc at least, I'm hopeful that we'll have things streamlined a bit. But it was also partly because SWAT, this project didn't really fit neatly into procurement templates because, you know, we had started it these little step by step, and we had already all the working relationships going. So it was about being a bit agile too, and so yeah, I was lucky to have leaders that were willing to take the risk.
Absolutely. And just a comment to the example that New Zealand can on stage is not to be underappreciated. Like the ability we have, whether it's pendulum swings or innovative data ideas, to bring that and do it incredibly well and let others scale it. Even like our search and rescue team, that's on a global scale. What we do with conservation, that's at a global scale. So tiny but mighty, what a phenomenal initiative. So thank you very much to Dr. Kate for bridging science, citizen data.